Greetings, friends. I want to address the people who say Canada is finished, Canada is over, Britain is finished. It's just so silly because all the Western countries have all these problems. We are all fallen. And you could say that we are fallen. I would agree with the statement that Canada is fallen, Britain is fallen. I would not agree with the statement that Britain or Canada is finished. That's a different degree. Then you're saying you are spiritually defeated. We are politically defeated, economically defeated in some regards, but we are not spiritually defeated unless you believe we are, in which case it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I believe that we are not defeated and that this is not the end and that we can never give up. And I agree that we are never going back to the way things were in the past. Those times are over, but our people is what counts. States come and go. National boundaries come and go. Laws change. To some extent, the culture changes. But the core elements of a people, if the people is to remain, can survive. And they have survived. Not always, but we have heritage going back centuries and centuries and centuries. But I wouldn't even harp on saying that Canada is fallen. If you keep saying that all the time, that just becomes defeatist. That's not helpful to anyone. Like, I wouldn't disagree in principle that Canada is fallen. I wouldn't make it a habit of saying it all the time. And on principle, I would never say Canada is finished, Canada is over, because that's just too much. And it's also stupid, because if you say Canada is over, then stop commenting on anything to do with Canada, or anything you say is over, therefore becomes irrelevant because it's finished. It's no longer something that exists. It's over. Right? It basically doesn't exist anymore. So then you don't need to complain about it. You don't need to comment on it as soon as you say something is over. Then shut up about it. Well, then fine, you can say that and let it be the last thing you ever say on that topic. Because if we take you seriously, if you took yourself seriously, then that's it. Well, Canada's over. We all know that mass immigration has flooded our countries and that our governments hate us and that our governments want to make us disappear by whatever means necessary. And in Canada, we have medically assisted dying, like the government encouraging people to delete themselves. Feminism, demoralization, all of these negative things we could point out. Many people say COVID was the end of Canada because of all the authoritarianism. So of course, these are very dark signs of our times. And that inspires people to say the country is over. And yet, we're still here. We still have people. We're still breathing. Like, we went through COVID, and the wounds that were caused during COVID have not healed. Probably never will be healed because no one was ever held accountable for that. And a segment of the population believes they were right, and a segment of the population, on the other hand, believes that their alternative was right. Maybe there's many in the middle that don't care, but there's never going to be any resolving that disagreement. At some point since the Second World War, we fell. But would you therefore say that Canada was finished? If COVID was the end of Canada, why not the First World War that led to a spiritual crisis? We've survived. We still exist after these events. These events cause wounds. Some of them heal, some of them don't heal. But life goes on. We are alive and breathing, and there's probably more white Canadians or white British or white Americans that exist in 2025 than existed in 1825. I'm pretty sure, or certainly than in 1725. Maybe not as many existed at the height of the boomer generation. Maybe that would have been the peak of white absolute numbers. But all we see is the proportions. We just see the rest of the world multiplying, and then they swamp us. So we feel like we're disappearing. That's one way to look at it, but that's not the only way to look at it. And you must never give up. Things are very dark. It's important to point that out. But I cannot stand this clickbait, negative slop. We are finished. Oh, please. Then don't complain. Stop talking. At least don't talk on this matter anymore because it shouldn't matter to you because it's over. You know, one thing I noticed maybe this is a different topic. I was talking with a guy whose handle was Syncretic Nationalist. I think he was an Australian guy, randomly on Twitter or X. I was saying something pro-monarchy, he was saying something against monarchy, and I'm not trying to make the case in this video one way or the other. Well, I don't believe you always have to have one form of government for every situation. Sometimes I agree you can have a different government for different situations, but I do support King Charles, even though he's not perfect, of course. This guy said something very cynical about, how you're just basically a slave or something to that effect if you accept to be a subject of a king. And that's just very pathetic. And I said something like, well, what about the Australians who died at Gallipoli in the First World War? They signed up by the thousands and thousands to fight for their king, who resided in England, far, far from Australia, but they still felt that connection to the British Empire and the British throne, just like Canadians did at the time. And he said something very dismissive of those people. He said those were some people 100 years ago that had outdated notions. And I just thought to myself, how can you call yourself a nationalist and yet you seem not to care much about the worldview of your own compatriots from not that long ago, only a few generations ago? I found that to be fascinating. And I think a lot of people, it's just materialist stuff. They want this, they want these rights, they want these things to make them happy. They want better economic times, they want the house, they want the car, the 2 cars, and they want the freedoms that people had in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and up until the 90s. The boomers had a lot of material experiences that millennials and Zoomers can't really afford. So obviously with COVID, with the 21st century mass immigration, we see these opportunities lessen. We see a lot of almost 19th century conditions emerge, and we say, this sucks, this is so terrible, look at it, it's all coming down. And then I think that leads us to remark often that, well, Canada is finished. It's not finished. We've gone through a lot. We've gone through a lot as a people. We still have opportunities to affect our future. Hasta luego, amigos.